Okay. Well, sorry I couldn't be there in person today. Sometimes these day jobs take precedent. Greg, you'll have to chime in when you can because I won't be able to read the crowd. Anybody for homework? Anybody see anything? Go anyplace? See anything neat?
I did.
Go ahead, Brady.
It's Brandy. I went to Waxahachie, Waxahachie, and I walked around specifically because when I drove into town, I noticed a lot of their sidewalks were really wide, and they had one-way streets, and it looked like the sidewalks were fairly new. So, so that was really interesting that they still had some parallel parking, but they had a lot more one-way streets and really wide sidewalks, which was nice. They had really good parking signs. They have a parking garage there. I looked up their population. It's about 43,000 people, so a little bigger than us, but not a lot. So just some things that I noticed.
I just want to share, this is Mario. I went to Waco just to have lunch with my mother and to visit Chip and Joanna Gaines' place. And it got me thinking about sustainability. You know, they've been doing this show, this HGTV show, and all this mess for about 10 years now. But how do you reinvent yourself when you're that kind of a business? And how do you sustain that engine? You know, because it can go dead after a while, especially if you're in the decor business or restaurant. And how do you keep revitalizing all that real estate you're taking up in the downtown area?
I got to go to
Anybody?
Washington D.C. over spring break.
Do what?
I went to Washington D.C. over spring break, which was super fun. All the history museums, but also now doing this plan, I noticed like how big the sidewalks are, which was awesome. We walked everywhere, and there's seating, there's restaurants, there's planter boxes, and there was still plenty of room for like 3 or 4 of us to walk next to each other. And we walked and walked and walked and walked. My feet still hurt, I feel like, but it was really nice to be able to see. It's very walkable. We didn't have to Uber too many places. We walked to dinner, to lunch, to breakfast, and see all the museums. So that was pretty fun.
Can I say about Washington D.C., it's one of my favorite places, but it was a master planned city
Well, it was planned from beginning to end.
from the beginning.
I went to the small town of New York City over the spring break, and they still do a lot of outdoor eating and dining that they've made those pods like Jessica was talking about. But the most impactful thing I witnessed, and maybe the best museum I've ever been to, was the Tenement Museum. And I feel like there's some of the stories told there could be also told in our community too. So just really gave me a lot of food for thought and just wowed me, honestly.
Well, I had one observation, and I know Susie had mentioned this before, but we have banks in several places that have vibrant towns, and one of the places we have a bank that's been really hard to do any renovations, et cetera, is the town of Allen. Very hard to get permit, et cetera, and they don't have a booming downtown. And if you go to Farmersville, you go to Louisville, or you go to McKinney, they have booming downtowns, and they're much easier to work with when it comes to building something new or changing something. So I think that's going to be important that we make sure that going forward we have something in there that says we really have to address how people go about getting permits to do things and how that process is as easy as possible.
I agree. I think in the comprehensive plan, they're looking at things like that, similar things too.
Yeah. Good. Well, thanks for sharing. Let's move on to the next agenda item if we can.
Yes, so the next thing here, we're going to go over our housing economic survey result. I know this is too small a reach for you. We go to the next one. Our clicker's also disappeared, so it's been a fun day. So the housing economic survey, the last time we had a meeting, we said we were about to open it. This was a shorter survey as far as the length of time we left it open. It was also a little bit more detailed, but also really only had probably about 10 minutes to finish. Overall, the survey response was pretty good. Civic Brand seemed very pleased with it. We had more people take this survey than we did survey number 3. And so they were excited about having 302 people take it. We're also really pretty much in the green on the vast majority of our demographics overall. Each survey varies. Some are different as far as demographics for age, location, things of that nature, but this one was pretty much in line with where we've been so far. So DTJ seemed pretty pleased with it. This one focused on those very specific housing questions, economics, neighborhoods. So we know this wasn't a wide-reaching survey, because maybe not everybody had an opinion on it, and that's okay. But they had some very specific information they needed, so that survey closed.
Can we get a copy of that slide?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, and I will, so this should be up on the website. If it's not, it'll be up this week, and I'll email it out to all of y'all as well. We also have, the full one, which was on the slide before, where it shows all of the outreach to date. It's way too small to actually put on a slide for everybody to be able to see, so I'll email that out as well. So y'all kind of see where we are in terms of outreach over the entire project. So those are kind of the results of that survey. And I think we should have probably one more survey, and then of course some outreach when we actually start showing this plan to people and getting feedback and things of that nature. So a few more things are coming. Right now we're going to stop doing a ton of outreach because we're in kind of that writing phase. It takes a while, the writing, review, edits, and things of that nature. So that was our last survey that's planned for right now, and we probably will have at least one more. So do y'all have any questions about that before we move on to our big discussion of the day?
Not many of us over 75 responded to it.
It is a little, off balance with the minority population and the white population, if you count.
Yes.
You have 39 versus 218.
Yeah, and that was something we did bring up with DTJ as far as, DTJ and, Civic Brand as far as, demographics weren't where we thought they would be, but overall and all outreach, they were where they wanted them to be. So we know that different surveys and different outreach methods are gonna reach different groups of people. So they were comfortable with where we were overall. At the same time, when it comes to going through the plan and talking to different groups, we may have to concentrate more on different areas that have.
Can you remind us what this green zone was?
The green one?
Zone 3?
Oh, I have to go back and look at my map. I can find that and get it to you. Off the top of my head, I don't want to hazard a guess and tell you the wrong area. But I can find that, email that out to y'all tomorrow morning.
Could we open the housing survey back up to try to outreach specifically to some of the minority population? Is
If
that
there's-
possible?
I can ask. I don't have any problem with it. I know they've already started extrapolating some of the information out of that survey, but at the same time, if we feel like, hey, we didn't hear from this certain group, we can definitely request that.
Yeah.
So yeah, we can do that, and I think it's worth it if we have a plan on here's how we're gonna get it out to people, not just like let's open it up again and say, hey, it's open again.
So I know it doesn't really apply to us as much,
Mhm.
but I feel like with the comprehensive plan being pushed out another month or so, that we should attempt it.
I think I mentioned it previously, but one of the considerations, and I think one of the reasons why it is because, and even though it sounds like it should not be that hard, because all the surveys are either by email or the QR code, so that is a barrier for some of our minority families. At least I can speak for the Hispanic population. Just recently, and this is just an example, because we have done this over the years, and every time we do something online or QR code, we have over between 1% or 0 responses. Well, just this last 3 weeks, we are having a district-wide event. We had a survey in English and one in Spanish, QR code. We have 165 responses in English, 0 responses in Spanish. So this week, we're doing it by paper. So my suggestion would be, and I can help with that, if I can have the survey in paper, I might not have to make the copies, but definitely, I mean, we have contact with, the local stores or things, or even if there's a need to have a very specific, like how you're doing it, because I promise I'm not gonna be sitting down answering surveys. Or any specific regulations, but just to provide that opportunity, because that's what has worked for, at least for the families that I have worked with. They are very responsive when it comes to paper. I sent a previous, survey on paper, and I think we got like 243 responses
Oh, wow.
on paper.
Okay. Yeah, and especially if we have ways of doing it, I'm all for that. I just don't wanna open it up and be like, hey, the survey's back open,
No, no,
because
no.
then you're still gonna repeat the same results. But
Exactly.
We can absolutely do that. And
Okay.
I know the comp plan is meeting tomorrow, so Elena can bring that up to them as well, because I have a feeling they may have the same response to how the demographics worked out on this one.
I think just that, like you said, the grocery stores and stuff, putting it in some of the stores where people go is a great idea.
Or even
Yeah,
having
and
like a
target.
CO
How do
box, you know, just
determine
put
the
things.
target?
How do they determine, so the target,
Prior surveys?
so we send it out to anyone that has signed up for, any of our, emails, signed up through the website, we put it on Facebook, we send out a few emails, to other groups the city has a list for. The target for DTJ is to have a survey that looks similar to our demographics in town. So, we know we're not gonna get 100% of people, we're trying to have a survey result that has kind of a representative sample of what our community looks like, whether it's, ethnicity, area they live, age, gender, things of that nature. So we're trying to have a snapshot of what the community looks like, is the same group of people that are answering the questions.
Jessica, can I tell you, I heard from that one Native American and two of the Hispanic people that first question was kind of confusing and
So
made them
confusing.
pause.
Okay.
And I'm wondering if the way that was worded made people not take the survey, because it was housing stock was the word.
Okay.
And I don't know if that word is too technical. I'm a realtor, I've been a realtor, and housing stock, I don't know what that sounds like, it just, housing quality,
I also, on some of those questions, I didn't even really understand what what they were about. I just either put a 3 for neutral on some of those, that was my only option, or I just put, in my comments, I said, I didn't really, I said housing stock. And most of the questions on housing, what's the quality of housing like in, well, it's all over the place, it's all in different neighborhoods, and it was a way to specify that. So, I'm gonna say, good, bad, depends, it's all over the place. I thought the questions for me, a lot of them were meaningless on the housing person and stuff.
but I mean, of course,
I
you
think I
can't,
put that in my comments too.
you can't change the question right now, because then that would skew results,
Right.
just,
But I'm just saying this.
Couldn't change it
And I
without
just
redoing the
wanna
whole
make a
thing.
comment.
Were they
Question-
pleased, oh, excuse me.
No,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Were they pleased with these numbers, Jessica?
They were pleased with, what we've hit for the outreach overall. They were pleased with the total number of people that responded, since it was higher than the last one. But they did see that there was a difference in
But
the
lower than the
demographics.
first two, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
It just seems like the numbers are getting smaller, or people are getting tired of surveys.
I think some of it is survey
I
fatigue.
think that's
I
it.
think some of it's that it's a more specific topic. I think the visioning survey is easy to sell to everybody. Everyone wants to talk about the vision. Some people don't care about housing, or they've talked a lot about housing because we've had a lot of local media lately, or some people may have been confused by the questions or not understanding. So I think it's probably a combination of all those things.
but I'm noticing that, like, in the red zone, there were a lot of interested people. You know what I mean, depending on zones, so you did have some high interest.
Yeah, and I can get y'all that map of what the zone is, just as a refresher.
Yeah, I
looked at it,
can't
but I
remember
don't
those
really know
zones.
period.
I can't remember where those zones were, so.
And Mr. Gold, what were you saying?
When we think about people taking surveys, me myself, I look at it as someone sitting behind a computer, laptop, et cetera, taking. We always should meet the target, because we have enough media devices in hand to take a survey, but we don't do it. That's just a comment.
Also, a follow-up question on DTJ feeling happy with the overall outreach results. Could you explain to me how that is when, if you look at it, it is actually not representative of our demographics at all? If it were that representative of our demographics, then this town would be like, I don't know, I'm not a math person, but 90% white or Caucasian.
Yeah, and as far as this, what we have on the screen, this is just surveys. This is
Okay.
on, like our meeting in a box, man on the street,
Okay.
outreach event. So this is not the full picture. I can get that for you.
Okay,
Because that one is much more representative.
okay,
There are still some areas, under 18, we're under no matter what.
right,
And they kind of said that's pretty par for the course for any community, just because, under 18 is kind of harder to reach those kids without reaching their parents. If you don't reach their parents, you don't get them. So the under 18, they were not not saying that's a good thing, just saying that's kind of typical for what you see in other communities. So I can get you the full look at what it looks like. This was just for surveys.
I got it.
So I can send that to y'all tomorrow morning as well. Any other thoughts on this one? And we'll bring this up to the comp plan tomorrow as well, and kind of see if some of the things, Mario, like you mentioned, we can't rewrite the questions so we don't skew everything, but we can put definitions in there. We can find more targeted ways to get that information out, whether it's paper surveys, sending it to specific groups, so we can work on that as well. And we'll bring it up to them and see if they have any ideas on that as well. Anything else before we move on to our next portion? All right, Tori, you want to flip to the next thing? So this one, really today, I didn't have too much on y'all's agenda because I wanted us to have a chance to actually talk about the downtown draft. Before our last meeting, I think I emailed the draft to y'all maybe 2 days before, and then gave you a printed copy. So everybody should have got a printed copy like this at the last meeting. We try to deliver to as many people as possible, and if we didn't get you, we have your copy for you today. So we gave that to y'all. We got quite a bit of feedback from about 6 or 7 committee members. Extensive feedback from several Dr. He tells she's a professor, took back to grad school days. So we got a lot of feedback. We compiled all that feedback. It took Fort Tory about a week to put all the staff feedback, y'all's feedback into a document. We sent it over to DTJ, and they are still in the process of incorporating all of that. Their plan is to have another draft for me to look at in about 2 weeks, send some more feedback, and then y'all should get it about April 6th, I think is the date that we're supposed to get it back to y'all, which gives you about 5 days to look at it for our April meeting, and then we'll discuss it. But really today, I wanted to kind of go over some of the questions on the screen as far as, big overarching, is this the content that we want? Is there stuff missing? Is there anything in here that should not be included? Same type of question, are there any topics that should be included that we didn't? Anything we missed? Any big red flags? And do you like the overall draft of the?
So this would be the final time to add anything?
Well, no, you will get another draft version. So this is really just kind of are we going in the right direction? Did you hate everything? Did you love it? Are there big topics we completely left out? Because if there is an area of town that we didn't talk about at all in that draft, we need to know about it now so we can start doing some of that research, outreach, driving, but that will take a little bit longer. So really this is just kind of are we going in the right direction? Do you feel okay with it? With the caveat that yes, edits are needed. And then you will get another draft that you can edit again.
Jessica, I've got to leave, and I'm sorry about that, but so if I might just add my quick 2 cents, but, and I also provided quite a bit of feedback, I think, but, the 2 nerd professors here, but, which is one of my issues. I think that, and I may have talked to you, I know I'd have to Brian about this, just some citations for what looks like to be some bigger, ideas maybe that related to urban planning and specifically downtown planning would be helpful to me. But I have, my one question is the inclusion of the 2003 comprehensive plan, where it is. It feels more like an appendix item because that 2003 plan is something that this group hasn't really referenced a lot, and it felt a little disjointed to me. So I would feel more comfortable with it being in an appendix or not embedded where it stands, because we have not really looked at that plan. I feel like we've looked at other things, other maps, more than we've looked at that. So that's, I'm throwing that out there, and then I'm leaving, and I'm sorry. Anyway, thank you very much. So, yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up on yours? Did the city take any action on that plan?
The 2003 plan? So overall in the city, yes. So like this one, I can show you some of them.
Yes, so there are several items that were implemented from that plan, and then there were several that weren't. What we're finding is the ones that weren't were primarily due to lack of resources for staff. You have to have staff to implement a lot of those programs, or, but lack, some of those, I think were more also like a lack of political will, because they just don't make sense. For example, there's a recommendation in there that we should incorporate more manufactured housing and to establish mature single-family neighborhoods, and that's never been anything that's been supported. But we have implemented a lot of the things in there. But one of the things that is challenging with that plan is because it's so old, that stuff doesn't even apply anymore. It's no longer relevant.
all look at some of those 2003 things that we put in there and say, I don't think any of these are relevant anymore, we can take this out.
Jessica, and the other committee, your counterparts, they actually went through and made a list of the things from the 2003 plan that were accomplished and were not accomplished. So there's an actual document that shows the answer to your question.
It hasn't been finalized yet, but we will, we'll get to both groups as soon as it's done. The subcommittee is working on that, and so they're ready before we share it with our group.
I guess I second what Shay said. This is our committee, this is our plan. We didn't discuss that. It's not relevant for us per se, smack in the middle of what we're talking about, what we did. So you can have that, you can add that thing, but put it at the back, because I got very confused. I'm like, this wasn't what we were doing and what we weren't looking at.
Or like he said, having a list of what were the ideas from, because I had the same question, like what was the things that were brought back from 2003 to see if, because yes, it probably were like good ideas or applicable ideas, but I just want to make sure to have those differentiated to make sure that, like you said, going to the same direction the committee is wanting this to go.
Yeah, one of the notes I put on there as well is that we didn't have a reference to the 1973 plan. We really didn't have any references to, and granted, these are not big public plans, but there was also a Texas Main Street streetscape plan that we put in place that y'all got very early on.
Right.
So there aren't references to those, so that was one of the notes that I made, that, you know, some of the comp plan recommendations are great, and I think we should still do them, but we also didn't reference some of the good elements out of the other plans we have as well that still may work. So that was one of the notes I sent as well.
Jessica, I sure, where that we look at just east of downtown, we cover across University Drive and Shawnee, that area, to bring in the historical, as a gateway, applicant to the gateway material, making sure that we highlight that area as a possibility of extension in the future. That somewhere in this report it needs to be highlighted.
Yeah, and the Shawnee thing, I also had to hop on a call with Keith, because a few times in there it says like the Shawnee Historic District, and so I kind of had to hop on there and clarify with him, like, this is the plan that we're working towards, is having that as a historic district. There's groups involved in that, and people that are very excited about it, but it's not a historic district yet. So I think we were confusing them with what we were kind of doing on the staff, and so I think we clarified that, and they're gonna rewrite a good chunk of that Shawnee information, include more now that they have a full understanding of kind of the direction we're going, where we are currently, and where we want to be.
Great.
Was there anything else we were missing?
Oh, that's okay. I think, I can't remember now if one of the, like, pilot projects that we were talking about, are any of them focused on the Shawnee area at all? Because if not, we should probably put one in there
I
that
don't think
is.
the pilot projects are. Let me flip to it.
I was trying to find it, but
Yeah, because those should start on page 105 if you have your draft with you.
yes.
So I don't believe one of the pilot projects is Shawnee.
Yeah.
Because I think these were more kind of our infrastructure projects. And Shawnee, as of today, was more the conceptual, like,
Right.
the historic district, and we didn't have any like concrete, we need to put an archway here, a gateway here, what that
But
really looked like.
what about putting, like, creating that as a pilot project, like making that so that's a project that we can say, here it is.
Is one reason we didn't look at it that way is because of, it rests on that boundary? Is that one, I'm trying to think about why we didn't,
Why we didn't look into the Shawnee.
the Shawnee as an opportunity, because we did do a trail around it, maybe some dining at that trailhead, but that was about it.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons that we didn't get into it too far is because the Shawnee area and that idea as a historic district kind of came later on in the outreach because it got brought up. And so it didn't get as much attention early on, and so maybe when we were kind of making these pilot projects, deciding on what was priorities, it just didn't come up as much. That being said, if this group feels like we missed an opportunity, we know it came up late, we haven't looked at it as much or haven't done as much outreach, we can absolutely recommend that, this needs to be a higher priority, or be looked into as one of the pilot projects and maybe sub something else out. There's nothing wrong with saying that those are not necessarily our pilot projects, and we wanna put.
But on the
something
flip side, we risk displacement of current residents with revitalization.
Well, I think they're further along on that Shawnee project than we're giving them credit for. I think we need to include that. And I know, isn't that comprehensive plan working on that area too, Jessica?
Yeah, so,
At what-
the comprehensive plan,
Aren't they working on it too? The Shawnee plan?
they're talking about the Shawnee area, and if that's an area that should be reconsidered for further study.
See-
Almost like its own small area plan, or own kind of neighborhood plan. And so with the comp plan, they're gonna be, they've broken the city down into neighborhood units, providing kind of summaries of each one, the makeup, demographics, and housing. And so we, anticipate there may be a couple of recommendations to study some areas further for a potential for redevelopment or revitalization, and Shawnee may be one of those areas. We've been talking about that as an area for a potential smaller area plan.
Is that because of lack of history?
See, I see that more
Available
downtown
history.
than
I'm sorry?
citywide.
Is that because of lack of favorable history of Shawnee?
Well, I think it's because there's so much opportunity there, for improvements and catalyst projects. That area hasn't received as much attention as some other areas of town as far as investments and infrastructure and things like that. And so, in some instances, it could use some city intervention to help, revitalize that area. So, something that the city's looking at as far as that committee, they're talking about that as an opportunity for revitalization and so.
Yeah, from East Main to Woven Road used to be most businesses, well, self-made businesses, in Nacogdoches at one time.
And I think the great thing is now we have a good group of citizens that has brought kind of that, attention to that history and, kind of telling everybody what this neighborhood was, what's still there. Cause that's really pretty essential, cause not like we as a city are like, all your buildings are historic now and you're under historic overlay, like it takes that community involvement. I think we're finally getting that, which is wonderful, cause then we can have kind of city, community all kind of pulling together to make this into an actual district, which I think would be great.
Yeah, and one of the sad parts is most of the historic building has been a long time removed.
And as you look at the gateway entrance, whether it's from West Main or from East Main, and they're both are terrific sites coming from the top of the Arden Hill and so forth. That's why I really think that we need to highlight coming down the hill, the Shawnee area.
I
That'd
agree.
be
I
part of
see
the
that more
report.
downtown than citywide. I think we need to find out exactly where they are on that plan.
Jessica,
Yes, sir.
I think at this time it would be good to bring up the old subject of the 1846 boundary as a defining shape of downtown. It deals with, it begins a clear definition of how Shawnee fits in. It creates literally sort of automatic gateways. It is viable and its accurate history and its unique from Texas. Why haven't they included that at this point with a definition of its origins? The fact that it's an enabler of a lot of the other related projects. It is the most significant part of the presentation downtown, if you're going to use it. And the consensus has been with our discussions over a number of months that it is significant. Why is the firm not putting it in there? Have they not been told?
They are, and it is in here, so one of the images, I couldn't tell you which page it is, has a big space for an image for the 1846 map, and then all of our maps that show the gateways and things like that have the 1846 map on there, and you can kind of see the gateways almost mimic it, but it's not spelled out in here.
But there's no text to go with the graphics, and there's a great deal of history in the text.
I agree, because they put that map on there and it kind of fits to where all the gateways are and all the nodes we talk about, but there's nothing written in here like, here's what the 1846 map is and here's why we're using it, so that does need to be added. I agree.
There needs to be a statement of why is significant. In fact, it leads automatically to having some sort of display in the visitor center that tells a great deal about it, because it is one of the two things that clearly defines Nacogdoches as what we like to call it.
Absolutely. And we'll pass it on. I think it was in a few people's notes, it's in mine as well, that, you know, the map is in there, which is great. It's laid over kind of our new gateways, notes, things like that, but there's nothing spelling out like what this square means. So yes, we do need to have that.
Some supporting text needs to be in there rather than just.
Absolutely. Is there anything else in this graph that y'all think is just completely missing?
I have one thing, but it's more like star number 2.
Okay, that's fine.
Because I put on page 71, and I already included it in the notes I turned into y'all, but on civic parks and open spaces, I include appropriate amenities in civic parks and open spaces like restrooms, drinking fountains, Wi-Fi, and seating, because that gives future guidance to the city, so we don't get mired down in these discussions. Should we put bathrooms? Should everybody have Wi-Fi in parks? You know what I mean? But I'm wondering, is there any other place we're missing in this plan where we can include something that would save us time in the long run? Like, what basic amenities are we leaving out in these opportunity zones that we can write in here now? That way we don't have to have 34 meetings over 18 months about water fountains.
Yeah.
We can open the book and say, hey, our guidance was every park gets water fountains, Wi-Fi, bathrooms, changing tables. Are we missing something else?
We may be, and that may be something that we all go back and look, because off the top of my head, I mean, of course, in the parks and open spaces, like, that's an easy win, where we should have water fountains and bike racks and restrooms and things of that nature. In the pilot project specifically, I would have to go back and look, but it's not a bad idea to include those. We do have to keep in mind that this is kind of an advisory document, that it helps us when we go to city council and we do those budget amendments and write our budgets, but it doesn't mean it has to be done. So I think writing that in there is good and it helps.
Yeah, guidance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talking to Elena or Brian, and you guys who have been meeting about this for 3 years, 4 years, do y'all know of anything we can add that would save us from 3 years of meetings?
Y'all know anything else out there?
I mean, like, we shouldn't have to rewrite a book when we need an additional library when our population goes over 500,000. You know what I mean? But yet, we're gonna have to go there in 20 years.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I know has come up with the comp plan as well, is also like parks and open spaces. Like, not saying you should have, you know, this many parks in this location, but it's that your park systems and your open spaces should grow with your population according to national standards. So I can look and see if there's some other wording that we can put in some of these other places. Because of course, you know, Main Street America, you know, Texas Main Street Division, we have certain standards for different things in downtown regions. So I can see if there's some wording we can pull out of there. That way it's not so specific that it's like, you must have a water fountain every 30 feet. It's, here's our national statewide standards that Nacogdoches should follow along. So yeah, I can look and see.
For amenities.
So Mario, there is, that section is in there, and it may not be in this draft, but it's in another one. They sent it to me and said, is this wording correct? So I know it's in some version. And it does relate to park and open space and sports complex per population. So that's something that grows as your city grows. It's not, you must have X number. It is a recommendation for park space per population, so that as you get to 40,000, 50,000 population, you have that metric to record.
So think about Fredericksburg, where they have downtown bathrooms. You know, for 20 years, they didn't have downtown bathrooms. So somewhere they got a clue that, hey, downtown needed bathrooms as a
They got plenty
population.
of them now.
So I'm wondering, do we need downtown bathrooms?
Oh, I mean,
Yes.
Yeah, you know, but are we leaving that out? That we need to have
Yes,
some facilities for our
it's in the
visitors? Do we need another rec center? Do we need to put that somewhere?
So as far as the recreation center portion of it, that may flow better into the comp
Comp
plan
plan.
side of things, since it's a service to the whole community, not specifically to downtown. But at the same time, you know, if we're talking about restrooms, I know that John brought up yesterday with the Capital Needs Advisory Committee, we talked about, the potential of, the parking structure, parking garage. And if we do big projects like that, should it have a restroom in there that's for the public? So we did talk about things like that. So I mean, as far as restrooms downtown, we could always use restrooms. A lot of it's where do you put it, how do you factor that in, but you know, we can figure that portion out. Because especially for restrooms right now, the only public restrooms that we have downtown are at the Visitors Bureau.
They close at 4.
Yes, which is open during their open hours. We
If
have
they're
some
open.
downtown retailers that will let you use them, some restaurants are nice enough, but those, and then, down in Festival Park, right down the street, we are in the middle of building our new restrooms. So those will somewhat service downtown and event areas, but there's not any on the other sides of town unless you're going to like our museums and things like that.
So I would just ask the city staff to think about those things that we would need to meet about, like having a parking garage or bathrooms, when the answer is yes. Already yes, we need bathrooms.
What'd you say, Jessica, they're building new restrooms where?
At Festival Park,
Oh, really?
yes, right over near, where the basketball court is, there's a new restroom going up, they put up the steel structure yesterday.
They've already started on them?
Yep, I just posted a new picture to Facebook about 10 minutes before we walked in here.
But there were some over there, right, before?
There were, and then those were taken down, and we got the funding.
There were
to
some
put
down
those
there,
up, 'cause
correct.
there's 4 new restrooms going in at 4 different parks.
Yeah.
And so the one at Festival Park is, I think, the furthest one along. We go with the steel structure for the walls and the roof. It looks like this weird little flying V thing right now, but it's getting up there.
That's interesting.
I also think we should put somewhere in like the amenities area or something, that we really should consider shade when we build things like that.
I think we should use shade, I think, downtown, little sprayers. I mean, it's gonna get hot, it's hot, and getting hotter, and you're gonna be downtown, you're gonna be outdoors.
And I'm specifically thinking of like over the basketball court, you know, things that are already there that I have talked to people who have requested that, and I have not put it in my notes because I wasn't thinking about it when I was making them. But that's like the number one thing when I've gone down to talk to people playing basketball. They're like, can the city put a shade over this court? And so I think we should consider shade over anything we do.
Even when some for buildings, I know, the brewery, Paul was saying we should have set things up a little different and it would have had shade where it needed to be at a better time. But they didn't think about that, but that's something to think about when putting buildings up.
Yeah.
Where the shade will be.
You know, just as you enter Henderson, Texas, just forget the city limits. On the left is a nice, baseball, softball complex.
Yeah.
And they have that tent, that shed over that basketball.
Yep.
You pass that day and night, kids out there playing.
Yeah.
All the time.
And
Uh-huh.
I like it.
McCormick's had top, right?
Yeah, McCrimmon does, yes.
What we also is, I was looking at the economic development section, we're talking about the tourism and the service industry, and they said Nacogdoches should continue catering to tourism through sports, arts, culinary arts, or maintaining its character. I think contributing to tourism too is gonna be things like, I don't know if that's a place to include wider sidewalks, restrooms, bike paths, things that will bring people here. What are some, little kind of mini playgrounds, little pocket parks? Those are all things that the city does that aren't an industry, but something that we do, and that actually will grow our economic base, I believe. Because people go, oh, it's a cool place to come, we can go there and hang out and be cool and not be growing and have our kids come around and play, and we'll go there. But the way it is now, you drive behind the building. Must be nice for people that just want to shop.
So really looking at more of those quality of life things that make
Yes,
you want to be here.
yes, that will bring people here to spend money and then hopefully to live,
Yeah.
build a house.
I mean, even just traveling through, that's the one thing, when we're traveling, I look up, is there a splash pad we can stop at the way, or a nice park where we can grab lunch and then come and sit in the park, especially, not as much now that my kid's 13, but when he was, 3 to 11, we always went to a park for lunch. And that was the most important thing. I always look up what do they have here? Do they have bathrooms so that we can, you know, go to the bathroom as we're continuing on our drive? So
I think I agree 100% because that reminds me when, and even now, I have my 8-year-old, but I remember when my son was younger, I cannot tell you how many times I just purposely went to Lufkin because they do have one part where they have the water sprinklers. It was just, but how easy would it be to have something small, even in downtown? I mean, I would go there 100%. So people are actually traveling even around the area just to find those spots. But once again, thinking about, does he have a bathroom? Does he have shades? Or a place where, as a mom, I can sit down and look at my kid while they play, and if they need to use the bathroom, it's like right here. So all of that, just simple things that can make a huge difference to attract not only visitors, but even from our local community, having that attraction that will definitely benefit you know, local businesses around, because, you know, at a point, kids are gonna get hungry, I'm gonna get hungry, there's right there, you know, the restaurants, and why not? So it can be really like a family center, but just adding that one simple thing, and shades and bathrooms, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
It reminds me of like, I think it's Sundance Square in Fort Worth, but it has like the big water area where it's not a splash pad, but it's all the water that's shooting up out of the ground in like different time periods and stuff. And there's seating all around it, and there's restaurants, and
Yes.
you can sit there and drink coffee and let your kids run around in the water and stuff like that. So
It doesn't have to be a lot, does it?
it doesn't,
No,
it doesn't.
no,
And
so simple.
I like the idea of the one similar to Fort Worth where it's not a splash pad that's just for little kids.
Right.
It's one of those things, it could be an art feature or a landscaping feature, and it's still
Austin
Like-
has one of those too.
yeah, it's like those are fun, and I think that's one of the examples they use in our design charrette for some of Festival Park. Like,
Mhm.
and some of that be down there,
Yeah.
and then redevelop and put coffee shops down there, and still have huge green open space, big festival area, music, but you know, you can still have those fun water fountains and coffee
And it can
Kind of
tie in,
combination.
the one in Austin is all red brick,
Mhm.
and it can tie in with our, you know, red brick theme so easily, yeah.
Absolutely. And I think those things are not luxuries. They're not,
Exactly.
I mean, we see them as something extra that we could do to make our town nice, but I think there's something vital that we have to do to keep our town alive,
Yes.
actually. Not just,
Mhm.
it's not something nice.
Well,
We're gonna fix the sewers and streets, we have to have the things in the town that are gonna make our town a place that you wanna stay and live, or
Yep.
kids wanna stay.
I talk to people all the time who have told me we would stay in town longer, except there aren't bathrooms, so when my kid needs to go to the bathroom, we just go home. Because like, what are we gonna do? Go to the gas station or, you know, no, but if there were bathrooms, we might stay in town longer, and then we'd be like, oh, it's too late. We gotta go get, you know, food or something.
I'd like to see people who don't have kids, or don't come downtown, or don't care about splash pads, see it as an economic benefit to the town to have those things, even though they don't care about the person who knows.
I never did find that map, so it's on.
That's something that we sell and talk about.
1846.
So on our question number 3, when y'all were going through this, are there any huge red flags in this that you feel like we, DTJ, writing all this, completely missed the mark? Anything that really kind of gave you pause, like maybe we shouldn't include this and we need to scrap this whole section? Was there anything like that that stuck out to y'all?
Page 117.
I love this.
Now I'm gonna see what it says.
It's not a red flag,
Okay,
but I think to a layperson,
okay.
mixed income, multifamily can be misused, misconstrued. I like since it's a general plan, I like the term flexible housing options. I've already given that to y'all as feedback. Because mixed use and multifamily sounds so specific, like that's what's gonna be in here. But if you do flexible housing, I know DTJ has tons of examples of flexible housing options. So I would like to see them all versus be tied to multifamily or mixed income. When I hear that, I think Section 8, I think something subsidized, I think something modular, you know what I mean? And this is a new plan, not the 2003, just updating.
I agree
Flexible
completely.
housing, it could be all single family, or it could be whatever, but it's flexible, that's the key, that's a really good point, Mark.
Yeah.
Multi-generational, row homes, townhomes.
Any other big red flags, things that y'all think we need to cut out of here?
I just feel like it needs to continue to read our plan and not comprehensive plan with us stuck on top. Because we had a lot of discussions that I just didn't see reflected, but I made lots of those comments.
Are there any other specific things that you didn't see in there that we need to?
Yeah, well, some of the, restrooms didn't come up nearly enough, which I know I wrote down. You know, we had a lot more discussions. I put the 1846 map in there. You know, there were a lot of our discussions that just didn't show up.
Okay.
But I wrote that in there. Yeah, that I felt like we've spent so many meetings, but we weren't represented in here.
Okay.
Page 120. I know I provided this to you before the meeting, but on parking, downtown enhancements, under the key highlights, we talked early on about creating those drop-off zones for people with mobility issues. I mean, if you're gonna reduce parking and close some of that and do one-ways and reduce some parking, you know, it would be nice to have some drop-off zones
Okay.
for older generation, for people with mobility issues, and make that intentional for that opportunity area.
I'm writing as fast as my hand will go. Is there anything else in here that were red flags or things we missed or topics that were included that shouldn't have been? I don't want to keep asking y'all the same question over and over, but I want to make sure everybody has a chance to share their concerns because, you know, like we've said from the beginning, this is our plan. And I know if a few of y'all are concerned that, you know, all our conversations are reflected in here, we're going to edit this until we feel good about it.
On page 132, the anti-displacement strategy, I just had a question about how is that gonna work? And do we need more information, about that? Like, I don't know. I just felt like there was some questions with that.
Yeah, and I don't know if I necessarily have an answer to that one.
Yeah.
Which, the anti-displacement strategy, I don't know if you've looked at it or not.
For like the gentrification and
Yes.
Yeah.
things like that. So there's a lot of different strategies depending on what your goals are. So if it's like a single family area and you have a certain kind of character type, you don't want people just going there bulldozing and rebuilding new. You can basically adopt design guidelines for a specific area. It says any new development will comply with A, B, and C. And usually you can base it off of what's in the neighborhood there today. So like kind of do like a inventory of the character, and then you say, all right, all new homes are gonna have pitched roof with front porch, and you know, you include all those things that make it fit into the neighborhood versus making it seem like it's, you know, you're not retaining any of the original character. There's other strategies for housing, for multifamily housing, you're requiring a percentage of it to be, you know, affordable, and so there's a lot of different strategies you can do to make sure that you're not pushing people out of the neighborhood.
So is the plan going to identify some of those? Because we've discussed with the Shawnee area, which I know is slightly like on the edge of our zone, but that was one of the biggest concerns when people were like, we want to revitalize this, but we also don't want to gentrify it. So is there a place we would put that, because the Shawnee area is kind of in our area, where we can specify some of those things that, you know, we don't want it bulldozed and we don't want it, you know, to push people out, so.
Yeah, and I don't think there's a spot in there that we have it right now, because like we talked about, Shawnee wasn't kind of pulled out as one of those pilot projects or a big emphasis. But if that is something where we go back and tell DPJ, we want Shawnee talked about, and we want some of those anti-displacement strategies put in there as key highlights, so we can do that. It's not in here currently.
Yeah.
But that's something we can bring up, because, you know, the Shawnee area is kind of, you know, several different layers of it, where it's, you know, we want to revitalize it, we'd like to have a lot of stuff down there, but we're also looking at the historic district.
Mhm.
One of those
is there a lot of support for that on the comprehensive plan?
So the comprehensive plan, a lot of the discussions they've been having are geared towards neighborhood conservation. So protecting existing neighborhoods from encroachment, and essentially the gentrification from tracked out all the building new. And so it'll identify existing neighborhoods that may need additional protections versus other areas of the city. And so it'll also recommend tools to help, facilitate that conservation. And really it's talking about making sure the new development is compatible with what's there today and that you're not, degrading the existing character. So there is a big focus on that for comprehensive plan. And this,
What I want to say about displacement, though, from what I've noticed, is I'd like to know the affordability model, because like in Austin, affordable is 375,000. And even though we like to think we're small and rural, we have the same inflation, and home prices are not that cheap here. So is there a way to write in that affordability in here, or is that going to be market pressures based on? Are we saying affordable, but it's still going to be 195,000 for a home in that Shawnee area?
That was my next question, actually, is.
You know what I mean?
How do we?
Because your affordability formula automatically throws out
Yeah.
residents that live there.
Right, so is there a way to, specify helping residents, improve their homes, so that, they can stay there and they can keep it up, but it's not gonna be out of their price range?
And also people who are renting in these areas, they also don't want to necessarily displace them, although probably will, but.
It's gonna be based on low to moderate income index.
But let me add, Brandy, so if someone's paying $800 a month rent, they may never be able to afford an affordable $2,300 a month mortgage. That's way too much of a gap to fill. How do we address that? Or do we? Or is that a comp plan?
my guess is it's
Well,
more.
kind of like with the planning and zoning, can you have that neighborhood set in a certain style, but yet not have it historical, because
Yeah,
my vision of historical is I don't wanna touch it because it's too costly. So if you could keep with the style, without having to renovate it back to the original historical, just have neighborhood styles there.
so there's not a lot of housing though on that section of Shawnee Street, is there? Cause it's mostly buildings.
And it's not just Shawnee Street, it's kind of the whole neighborhood around it. So there is quite a bit of housing, it's not necessarily right on Shawnee.
But the minute you put one of those mini Targets on that gas station corner, that changes that entire character and price. Or a Whole Foods 365 moves in on that corner. That's had that gas station for 17 years, it's been toxic.
And now we have a fence.
Yeah, but one thing changes and everything will change.
Yeah, and that's definitely one thing that's been talked about is, historic districts versus conservation neighborhoods. We've kind of talked a little bit about transitional districts because we have a lot of these historic districts that almost butt up to each other, but not quite, and there's some neighborhoods in between. So how do we kind of blend style, blend history, to make sure that our planning and zoning codes, our historic landmark preservation committee, all of those things work together. And so that may be a conversation whether, because we have a lot of old neighborhoods in Nacogdoches, we don't have a lot of National Register Historic Districts, in those neighborhoods. So it may be a conversation on, is this kind of a neighborhood that we have some conservation on it, we talk about style, like Elena was mentioning, or is it a National Register Historic District? And so each of those things have kind of different protections on there and different styles and.
But that's cost prohibitive too, living in a National Historic District.
It can be, but at the same time, you have different historic districts look different. Our Virginia Avenue Historic District is those big Victorian houses, everything's gingerbreaded, some of them are multiple stories, but you also have the Zion Hill Historic District. They're all, the early 1900s, much smaller homes that don't cost as much to maintain and are actually at a pretty low price point, for Nacogdoches. So it all kind of depends on what your historic district is. At the same time, if you're in a historic district, we're not going to tell you, your house has had, a front porch added to it, you have to tear it off. 100 and do everything authentically, then yes, it is, expensive, but it doesn't have to be cost prohibitive to them.
Just, I'd like to point out that within this working area for downtown, we have two perfect examples of potential laboratories for exactly what we're talking about here. One being the Virginia Avenue, which has some magnificent restorations of large houses, and it has some current existing deteriorating junk that can be dealt with if we have a coherent plan. And that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be mentioned in this thing as an ideal thing to use as a laboratory to learn how these things can be made to happen. Because market forces will determine what money goes where. You cannot make the money go somewhere that it doesn't want to go. The Zion Hill area began with a plan. It has a plan with the city. It has several components already put in. It has several mistakes that are very obvious that occurred in the last 35 or 40 years. What better thing could you have as a study area than that? And that should be mentioned in here because technically, if we accept this 1 mile square, that's part of downtown. And it's already there and already is half work done. It just needs to actually happen because, and those things will be determined by the market. We had the opportunity 8 or 9 years ago to begin to put money in there. Everybody thought it was a great idea. Nobody ever did it. There's one person who has done renovations in that area right now. And I'm it. People were thrilled by it. I had other available lots that were available, that I made available. Everybody thought it was a great idea. Same things downtown in the 80s for living on the second floor. Everybody thinks it's a great idea. You tell them how it can be done. Give me a call, we'll have lunch, and I can show you the places that are available. They never, ever take you up on it. There has to be a motivation to get them to do that. And that's the thing that we can study in this plan, is how do you get people to actually put the money where the mouth is.
So John, that's a good segue to what my next one, page 148 and 149. The plan for monitoring and next steps seem kind of vague, and they seem like they need to be bullet pointed, because I can see future committee people either looking over it and glossing over it, or it just doesn't look very action oriented. I know it's a guidance, but we can bullet point the guidance to get there faster.
Yeah, and that section definitely is relatively vague right now because a lot of it, we need to make sure that the plan we're working towards and what we have in here is good before we kind of say, here's how you're going to check on this item and this item and this item. But yes, we can, this one will be nailed down a lot more definite and we'll make sure it's full.
And is this where we would include those vacant lot policies? The review?
Oh, yes. Yeah, we can do some of that here. Some of that will be in the implementation table that crosses both downtown plan and comprehensive plan. It's kind of like here's all the stuff y'all came up with, here's what priority they are, when they could happen, and then here's who's responsible for those different items. So some of that will show up there, and then some of that we can put here as well.
I think we're calling it vacant parcel
Yes.
the last time.
I think so. That sounds right. Yes, so some of that will go here, but I'll make a note that this needs to be lined out and have some more specific guidance in here that's bullet pointed out.
Like at gas stations.
Yes. Just tear it all down. What else? Like I said, I don't wanna beat y'all to death with the same question over and over, but I wanna make sure everyone shares all their thoughts. And again, this is not going to be the only time you see this draft. We're gonna take all the stuff we already did that we worked on, another draft of this before we start trying to promote it to the public and.
Will that draft, Jessica, have the maps and images and things in it, you think?
Yes, it should. It may not have every single one of them, especially if we add stuff like Shawnee, that one may not be complete by the time y'all see it. If we do add graphics and things like that for quote unquote new stuff we're doing right now. But the majority of stuff that y'all have already seen in different bits and pieces should be included by your next draft.
Okay.
And Brady, what was your-
I just had an addition to what Mario was talking about earlier on like page 132, on page 66.
What page, Brandon?
Page 66 and 67, we should use like residential projects or something like that instead of housing projects. And I know you guys probably got this from my notes, but and then I thought we needed pictures here about different the transitional mixed use housing options, so.
So like examples of what that would look like?
And they do, I know DTJ, I follow them on Instagram. They do have graphics showing infill projects, aerial view, 3D models. That would be perfect here, so people can see those residential infill. I think we can sell it if they can see it.
Yeah. And then I had another question about, because people use affordable housing so much, is there a grant or funding reason why we use that, or is it just,
I agree. I mean,
I mean
in the 80s and 90s, it was just called housing.
Yeah.
Now we're calling it affordable all the time.
yeah, like, housing should always be affordable. I mean, right?
I mean, if we're writing a 20-year plan,
So-
affordable is going to change by 2030, 2035.
And affordable is different to different people, so, I don't know, that term just like bothers me.
As
And
far as just the terminology.
yeah, I don't understand why we're using it unless there is some sort of funding reason why we have to identify certain areas as, areas where there needs to be affordable housing. So I didn't know if that was a reason.
She got the answers to that.
The standard metric that's used when we talk about affordability is really a percentage of your income. So it changes, right, based on your income. So typically the idea is you should be spending more than 30% of your total gross income on housing. If you are, then that's not really affordable based on your income.
Right.
So it's a percentage versus just a standard number, so it varies depending on where you live, cost of living changes all over the country. So that's why they use that metric. And so the idea is no matter how much you make the housing in your area, there should be options that you can choose from that fit within that.
So wouldn't flexible housing options be better? Because, yeah, that
'Cause
affordable housing,
It makes you think that it has to be affordable to the lowest
or that your
common
town's not
denominator,
affordable.
or, or is it affordable to,
The
the,
average income in our community.
Which is really low.
yeah,
So we're writing a plan that is skewed already if we use that term.
I think historically, affordability has been used synonymously with tax credit housing or low income housing, but really what we're talking about is attainable housing. Like housing that your local teachers can afford and your
Right.
firefighters can afford and kind of, people that.
But I'm an educator and I cannot afford anything in this. I mean, I own my home, but I cannot afford anything here. So that's a misnomer to put it in a plan. If you're
So is
looking at
flexible a better term for you than affordable?
Well, affordable, yeah.
See, I think affordable I just told GW, I think that's according to what I wanna spend, It might be affordable for me, but do I really wanna spend that? So I like the word flexible better.
It seems too specific for this global plan.
But I don't know if I can live with the word affordable. What's affordable to everybody in Nacogdoches? How are you gonna gauge that? How are you gonna put that according to the different categories of people and their incomes?
That's why that housing question is so hard to answer.
Do what?
Yeah.
That's why the housing question
Yep.
is so difficult for me to answer.
And it's why we can't pin down new developments, because we keep trying to pinpoint affordability. It's market driven.
it's why we need areas that have more than one type of resident, that we need
And a little bit more density.
a neighborhood that has both you know, single-family residents that have, you know, places
talk-
where,
And go talk to some of those people over on Applebee's End Road that have a affordable house put in their neighborhood that's not affordable for them. It's like I call it a mobile home, but anyway, you know, they're all upset over that. But it was affordable to the family that put it there.
yeah.
Right, right.
And every time I
really-
go to a meeting, somebody asks me about that number on Applebee's End Road, 33, whatever it is, you know, they bring that up. I'm so tired of hearing it.
Do they also mention property value?
Property value, well, you know, I guess that's determined by what's selling and what's buying right
And
now.
what's placed in that
Right.
neighborhood?
How much do I wanna sell you my house for?
As much as you'll pay.
Right. I had a realtor
Well,
say,
that was
don't
the
ever sell
problem
in
with that
Nacogdoches unless you got someplace to
Group
move
came
to.
in to put that housing below Pembroke.
Say that again?
When that group came in to do the housing below Pembroke, and everybody was in an uproar because
It was framed as affordable,
right.
but for a 65-year-old, their
The
income,
low-income housing for seniors, Pembroke.
but just for the group, for that 65-year-old, their income, they retired 20 years ago or 15. So what's affordable for them should not be used against
Well,
them
and
as
I
a
think they
target.
were okay with the senior affordable housing. It's just when, you know, you could have one senior and 5 littles.
But look at the 2 labels you just gave it, and then you had to apologize for it. Senior affordable, and they were okay with it. We shouldn't be labeling our flexible housing types. We should be providing.
Okay, so more in this as far as not using affordable, since that means different things, to different people, income level, so we're talking about flexible housing options where we could essentially flex the housing to fit the situation.
Or the seniors, or the teenagers, or the grandma, grandpa.
Okay. We will put that in there, and so that was 67, and I'll look for the other spots that we have it in there as well.
And just see what they recommend best practice-wise on that.
Okay. Yeah, and for some of the things as well, because there's been a few things that I kicked out of here that was kind of those buzzwords and the planning terms that not everybody gets and understands. So some of that we'll go through and see if there's any wording in here that means more to planners than it does to the average person, and then see if they do have, you know, even if there's a better term for flexible housing, and if there's something else that's more commonly used, it's not kind of that affordable, that has that negative connotation or the confusion.
What is the housing by Boys and Girls Club?
That is,
Section 8.
yes, well, it's owned by the Nacogdoches Housing Authority, and so it is controlled by
Subsidized?
your income. So it's
Subsidized.
Income-driven rental property.
But we learned at SFA, at the social work convention last summer, that those are coming on the market within 10 years because those subsidies are done. So even they're changing what they did over time.
I just had one more on page 70, the number 2, the part that says the R4 district allows all residential types from single family to multifamily and is applied indiscriminately over large sections of existing single family neighborhoods. So I just had a question. It sounds like it's a bad thing and we need to change that. Is that what that's saying?
So a lot of that, and Elena may want to speak to this as well, but a lot of that, even you'll look in some neighborhoods, like a lot of the Zion Hill Historic District, almost all of it's single family, and I think the majority of it's listed as R4. Yeah, so a lot of those, we kind of did wide swaths of areas that isn't necessarily matching what we currently have.
And a lot of these older subdivisions and neighborhoods have smaller lots and more compact development pattern than what our code actually allows for today. So they're single family, but they have a density similar to that, more of a duplex or almost like a multifamily housing development. And so the only zoning category some of those could fit into was multifamily, because they allow smaller lot sizes. So that's why you see some of that.
Mhm.
And then.
But it's not a bad thing,
It's
right?
not- well, the problem is our R4 district probably allows too much. It's too flexible. If you want a true multifamily district, you shouldn't allow single family in it at all. So it should just be multifamily. So we get a lot of issues that come up because people want to build dense single family, but they can only do it in our multifamily district unless they do a PE.
So if the city decides to relook at the whole zoning issue at some point in the future, are things in this plan in place to help figure out what better zoning we can have?
So in the comprehensive plan, there is a recommendation to do a code audit,
Yeah.
to basically look at our development codes and see, is there anything in the code that's actually keeping you from attracting the type of development you say you want? And is there anything in there that you can change to help encourage or promote that type of development that you're seeking? And so, we anticipate that that's gonna be one of the high priority items, is an audit of our development code to make sure it's in line with the values and priorities of the plan.
And if it's not,
Change it, yeah.
All right, and our last question on here, other than, what was brought up as far as moving the 2003 recommendations, kind of more in an appendix, do y'all like the overall layout? I know that seems kind of like a frivolous question, but like, do we like how it looks so far and how it lays out? Does it flow? To y'all, other than the caveat of moving that section?
I think the layout's better. The
When
format.
we get
that
the
they're
next
using.
revision, will it have images in it?
The majority of them. So things that we're talking about, like new stuff, if we're adding and needing to do a whole new, like Shawnee as a pilot project, we may not have graphics for that yet, just since we're having to kind of not start over since we have a lot of information, but we're kind of rewriting a new section or new point of it. So that may not be in here, but y'all's next draft should have the vast majority of the graphics. Because a lot of it's not going to be a big surprise as far as the graphics. You know, y'all have seen the stuff that was designed in the design shred. We've seen some of the examples from neighborhoods. You've seen the overall maps of where the gateways and nodes and neighborhoods are. So those things will be in here. They just weren't in here yet. So we may be missing a few, but you should have the vast majority of the graphics and maps by our next draft. Right. Any other thoughts? Final say for this round at least? All right, Tori, will you flip to our next thing? So our next steps, our next meeting, just as a refresher, is April 12th. DTJ is supposed to be getting y'all's next draft to look at to me by April 6th. So that way I can email it out to y'all that day. You'll have a few days to look at it before our meeting. And of course, we can discuss it again. Once we kind of get to the point where we are
Will you
good
be here for the
with
12th?
this draft and kind of say that as a committee, we can endorse it, we're good moving forward, then we're gonna start doing some of that public outreach. I don't know exactly what that looks like yet. If y'all have, you know, things that you want us to do to outreach, if you have a specific group you want us to go talk to and present the plan to, if you want us to go talk to Rotary, if you have groups you wanna meet with, we can absolutely do that when we're kind of running through this plan with people. We are gonna rely on Civic Brain a little bit to help us create some of those packages that are just easily digestible, because I know not everyone is gonna read this whole
Right.
thing.
That was my question is,
Yeah.
what parts of the plan are we gonna show people?
Exactly, and that'll be something that we're gonna get, once we're to a point where y'all kind of say, hey, we're good with this, knowing there may be some edits, but we can kind of endorse this plan, we're happy with showing it to people.
So we're gonna put it out there and let other people read it?
Yes, we will, and a lot of it will be on our NAC Together website, we'll have the full plan where people can read it, but we'll also have other
Could be
packages
done.
where it's, we can take kind of an abbreviated version and show different groups, do different surveys, because like I said, not everybody's gonna read the whole plan, and that's okay, but they may wanna look at snippets, the big drawings, the festival park, and so we'll have different ways to kind of outreach on that. So y'all be brainstorming, if you have specific groups you want us to talk to, ways you think we need to get it out, start thinking about that, and we'll start working.
Can I just say, since it's already March, I know when Austin did its Code Next, they did kind of a traveling gallery walk
Okay.
with some of their final products where people could rate
Mhm.
with those little colors.
Okay.
And I could see it happening in all quadrants of the city.
Okay.
You know, one north, one here, one south.
Okay. Absolutely.
And getting those visuals out, getting people rating, interacting with the stuff.
Oh, Jessica, let's find some real positive people to let read it first.
Yes. We'll get some of those champions to say, I love
Let's
this.
handpick the
These
people
are-
we give it to.
We'll have people that be like, I love this, these people are all geniuses, they come up with the most wonderful plan. And that may be part of it, is we have some champions that kind of go around, talk to Rotary, so that way it's not just me harping on like, look at this great plan I paid for that is a city employee I love, that way it's not just me.
That's why I said, let's find some real
Yeah,
positive
we'll find
people to
some
show it
positive
to.
People to do it, and so y'all start brainstorming some of those ideas, the gallery wall's great, we're gonna have a booth at the How To Festival that the library's putting on. It's gonna be like how to be involved in your city, we're going over things like NAC-wise, NAC 311, Tori's come up with some fun ideas on how to tell kids to be like little planners, and they get to vote on some of the drawings we have so far, so we're doing things like
So
that.
when is that?
That'll will be March 25th. So that won't be showing off the final plan. We'll just show them some drawings that we've done, kind of do that. So we're starting to do little things like that, and if y'all have other ideas, please holler at me, let me know, and we can help you kind of put that together. So those are our next steps, and as always, if y'all have questions, concerns, more thoughts, email them to me, and we'll get it over to DTJ. So that's all.
Are we forgetting someone?
Miles.
Miles.
We forgot about him.
Miles, are you still there?
I'm still here. I can tell you right now that I don't want to ever have to date online because this just isn't that good.
Wake up, Miles. Miles, we're through. You can wake up now.
No, I've been with you the whole time. Even Greg's texting me every now and then, prompting me.
Yeah, so that's all I
Caught
have
us in
today.
city commissioner for doing that. Don't need to read it.
No.
Sorry I couldn't be there live. It's just going to happen for a little bit. Thank you.
Jessica, I was